we started?
I haven't started.
Well, technical difficulties were. Good evening. For those of you who know, I've actually been here since 9 o'clock this morning. There's a lot going on out there. We're just trying to keep up with as many opportunities as we possibly can. So sorry for the inconvenience. Just getting you ready into the May 11th work session, the review of meeting agendas. Item number 1, we've got minutes from March 23rd, April 13th, April 24th, April 27th. I realize there's been several discussions. I think most people have had ample time to make whatever changes they were going to make.
May I? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So I sent an email earlier today that we had some additional changes requested, but I wanted to go through, there's only a couple of sentences in 4 sets of minutes. I'd like to go over them out loud now so that everybody understands what changes you would be voting on in the regular session. Is that okay, Mac?
Yes.
Okay. So on,
Is Van on?
oh no, she's not on.
She's not on yet.
Do you want to wait? Do you want me to go?
I mean,
It's
she's the person requested the changes.
Yeah.
Well, one of the changes did not come from her. It came from Councilwoman Dean.
Let's ask this question. Of the changes that everybody requested, irrespective of what they are they in the minutes? Was there any
Yes, sir.
change that was denied? That's how it was written?
No, and it was wordsmithing at best. It didn't change anything fundamentally. So I
Anybody
just,
have an issue? If somebody added it, it's there, and nobody got left out, does it matter?
Like, you mean like nothing in the email? Okay, alright. Well, he said email is black, she couldn't, nothing in the content, nothing in the email.
Can you call in with the WebEx number?
same link as everything.
Well, while we're working that out, because nothing has been excluded and everything has been added, even if somebody hasn't had a chance to read it, no one has an issue with it, let's just move on. Presentations. So we have Top Gun Award. They're not here yet, but they'll be here later, right? And then have the Officer Force and Service Public Police Department, right?
Yes, sir.
And they'll be here for that. Morrow Center Financial Update, Mr. Moore, or is this going to be Chris? But let's take it from you. You're spending it. Let's see what you get.
Good evening, everyone. All right, so I will be kind of brief today. The profit and losses for April, we're getting up there, net income of $10,009.86. Total income was $28,366.80. For new business, since I last was in front of you all, we brought in $14,127.80. And our projections for the month of May are right at $25,000 and some change. A couple things to bring up. Oh, and sorry, I did want to give the projections for June as well. We're seeing right now about 19,000, and there's about 4 contracts in limbo right now. We wrapped up with Georgia Cyber last month. At the end of April, went fantastic. It was great. They were a great client. Before you know, there was a 2-week rental, but it ended up being about a week and a half. They were astounded with our performance there in terms of their service and hospitality. They called the director of the Cyber Academy, called herself and said, this was just the best. They got all the good comments and all that good stuff from us and the parents. They were key on safety. They were big on our safety and our just our hospitality. We did provide them with. We took some of the money and provided small things. I think it was no more than $180. A wings and things snack service, a free gourmet donut service, free beverage service, a lot of which we had in-house already as far as beverages. And because of that, they called sometime last week, and we're the only site on this side using for the summertime for their summer testing. And so that $180 extra spent turns into almost a $6,000 contract for 4 days coming up in June. So that's really good. Another big one is Narcotics Anonymous. The Georgia headquarters is located in Stockbridge apparently, and they are interested in doing a 3-day conference. Had a conversation today, and that will be in February of 22. So really good there. And then we also booked a 2-day modeling conference, and then that's going to be pretty huge. I think it's like 400 girls, it's young girls, and training with all these people coming in from New York and LA. So it's going to be pretty razzle-dazzle over there, and it'll be very, very nice. As far as some things that are going on, as far as the building itself, and Billy can elaborate, we just have some more HVAC issues to deal with. So power did go out, I believe, yesterday on the South Lake community, and it knocked out quite a bit of things, but Billy was right on it, his team was right on it. So we have most of the power back. There's still some things that are off. Our toilets in the bathrooms don't work. So gotta get that fixed ASAP. So that's a big problem. But Billy is on it as well.
We talked to George Power not too long ago about issues with AMC Theater, South Lake Mall, dropping
Yeah,
power.
this was specific to the storm.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, what we had was a phase going from under the mall let me back up. So we had a phase line coming from 54 underneath the mall into the back of the mall that dropped. So we lost one phase, so some of the electricity throughout the building didn't come on. And so we ended up contacting Georgia Power. They came out immediately, made the repairs, but there are some things that did not come back up that need to be turned on. So unit 1 was one that needed to be turned back on. So we went up and turned it back on, but it switched over to heat. Nevertheless, I call it JCI. They're gonna be out either tonight or first thing in the morning. We'll get that squared away. And we're also assessing the electrical to make sure we don't have any additional problems. For example, in the upper dark space where we put the new lights, one bank of the lights came on, the other one didn't. We're working on that. I've got the contractor out there that did the install. He's looking at that. He's on site doing some other
But
work.
that didn't just affect us, that affected the entire mall.
Yeah,
That's
that's
part of
correct.
the conversation we had with George Power, is we realize this stuff's been under there for 50 years, and
It's too vulnerable.
Well, we had the same problem at the Welcome Center. We lost one of the phases to the building there also. The transformer on the corner blew up several days ago, and they didn't complete all the work. So I reached out to Georgia Power. They've been very responsive, and they're working on that one also.
What's not working in the Welcome Center?
The fire alarm panel was completely dark, which means we went in and we actually ran some tests to see where the problem lied. And we found that another phase leading into the building from the main panel out by the road, or should I say the green box by the road, has dropped. So Georgia Power has been notified, and they're working on that one also. So Scotty Burke with Georgia Power is working on that.
Oh, you said that they haven't been what's
They'll
up?
be okay.
Okay.
They'll have it done by tomorrow. They've been very reactive. They've not set on their thumbs. They've pretty much said, okay, we got a problem. Let's get the subcontractors out there and get it cleaned up as quick as possible. I feel comfortable we'll have it.
very good. Pretty good. Any questions for Warren? Ms. Knight?
No, I'm good.
Ms. Dean?
I'm good.
Ms. Tran?
She's muted.
Can I go back up and pick up the review of the meetings? Okay, so we had a presentation, public hearing on mixed-use moratorium. That's Kevin. Flexible spending plan, we talked about that. So it seems to be, do we have an update from Chris, or is that?
Well, and we sent it out to the $500. The new company has agreed to honor that $500 rollover.
South Lake Brick and Grout, that's basically repairing some of the grout systems out in the concrete on the sidewalk, right?
Yes, with the district.
And where's that?
That's gonna be a district.
Where?
The district.
When they pressure wash the sidewalk,
Inside the
the
area?
little brick
Inside the
sections, they
brick.
pull out some grout. And if we don't do that, that eventually is just gonna cause the brick to fail. Any questions of that?
No questions, but I just want to make sure I did speak to the Sylvia regarding, a scope of work for the district overall. And, again, I just want to express, I know it's not going to be the final list, that things like this, they're going to come up, they need to be addressed. But I just want to put it this way, after having asked on several occasions, give us something so that we'll know what the scope of work is. We understand estimates may change, they probably will change, but give us more information to work with today so that we can kind of move forward and follow along with the process.
Got it. Van, you all right?
And put those in the meeting minutes. That statement I just made, put it in the meeting minutes.
Is she still on mute? Is she-
I think she's on mute.
She's on mute.
Item 6, grant writing. You want to give us an update on
She's,
that?
Mayor, she's trying to say something, but she's on mute.
Okay, sorry, I was mute. We only have one offer from the All His Enterprise, which are the Joseph offers.
What?
She's saying we only have one offer, there's no comparative bid for this project, this
Well,
job.
Typically, in my practice, since it's under $10,000, it's not something we would necessarily need. Certainly, the state doesn't require it, our code doesn't require it, 3 proposals. So, if the council wants us to try and get more proposals, we will. But because the dollar amount is so small, and masons are not, they're harder to find than I would expect them to be, but we'll follow the lead of the council and get more proposals if that's what you want.
Is that supposed to be for the brick and grout repairs?
That's
Yes,
just
ma'am.
ground repair. When they pressure washed it, some of the
Yeah,
ground came out.
yeah, so,
So you are saying our typical doesn't require that?
Because of the amount of money.
Thank you.
All right, grant writing. Give us a little bit about
So as we talked about at the work session last, where we were, in response to some, interest in hiring some grant professional services, we talked about, Amanda Day, who interestingly enough was the grants administrator here many years ago.
the original.
The original. She since worked, for the Alpharetta, and now she teaches, grants and grant writing and management on a national level. And we talked about adding to her proposal, which is a $75 per hour proposal, a sort of a marker at the first year to evaluate, what all we applied for, and then another marker at the second year to say, is it an investment you want to continue making? And we made those changes, and then we also added a caveat that, either party with 30 days notice can get out of the contract with no penalty. Now, I don't mean to say contract. It would be honoring it because it's just a proposal.
So this would be very similar to a scope of work for a attorney, an engineer,
Sure, it's a professional service, yes, sir.
professional service. All right. Any questions related to that? Ms. Snow?
No questions from me.
Ms. Dean?
I do have a question. Will she be looking for grants or just, what you,
Well, so my idea would, yes, that she would be looking for grants. And from the conversations I've had with council, that's what I think everybody wants, which is like, say, we want an art project. And hey, Amanda, can you see if there are any art projects available that we can fit the criteria for? So, and then that would be preparing the application. And it's like I've said a million times, winning the grant is the easy part. Making sure it's managed till all the checks all the boxes are checked and you're closing it out. So she would be through all phases, the identifying the grant, the managing the application process, and then managing the grant itself through the closing of the grant.
No question. Ms. Trent?
With that rate that we have in place, with an assumption if we had someone doing a project and assume that if we have the number of hour equivalent with a full-time employee, we're looking at paying $150,000 for this position for a full-time employee. Would that be an ideal practice for us?
Actually,
If we hire a full-time person and do all the work, instead of paying someone 75 and equivalent with that cost?
and all you're doing is taking the 2,090 hours and doing a straight up math, and that even doesn't correlate because you have benefits that would go on top of that. At some point, you know, if somebody will locate us the grant, some of these things we can probably administer on our own. So that's just fair. It's just a matter of working with you on the system. If it gets to a certain number, we'll negotiate. I don't see that being a challenge.
So can we take into consideration what we're saying that certain number is in advance?
Because I don't know what that number would be. Let's say that you actually got us a full match grant, which they a couple of $1,000. Administering it at that number wouldn't bother us at all.
Right, that number, but then, you know, you say, oh, $5,000 for an art project, and it took you, you know, an exorbitant amount of hours.
I would assume if you found us a $5,000 grant, you wouldn't administer that one, you'd just try to tell us how to do it.
So I guess, you know, the overarching question to have a conversation about now is how do we manage so that this doesn't become too costly based on what it is that we want to draw to us? It's better to have the conversation now.
Sure.
Was she full-time? Was she on staff before?
She was here? Yes, she was.
She was, and that was her only job?
She didn't start as the grants
She
administrator.
started as my administrative assistant.
Like an administrative assistant, and then she, as most grants professionals do, she started doing it. But, and so, kind of like what we said last time, we're only gonna pay her for as many hours as we wanna pay her, right? So maybe it's after the application, I don't know really, maybe does the council vote on whether or not she manages it, or?
Well, don't we have to vote to basically accept grants?
Sure,
anyway?
the application.
So, you know, each item, if you will, is technically under your control as to whether we go and play fetch with it or not.
Except the research, because, you know, we're
That's true.
saying theoretically, we want her to research and, you know, find some grants, so.
But we think there's money on the table.
Right,
Fair.
so how do we cap that, how do we monitor that, how do we gauge that and set a bar? So that, you know, before it's all said and done, she's found some grants, and then we're getting to the process like, wow, we've already spent a significant amount, $75 an hour, and we haven't even gone through the application process for the management process.
Maybe it's a monthly report, and as we watch the investment grow, we make decisions incrementally, because.
We need some.
Yeah, and so every month, instead of waiting to that annual mark, we see how much we've spent every month and what did it yield. And so then it's a month by month, okay, no more research, or no more research until this, or, and, you know, that kind of thing. 'Cause
Do
it's-
grants go by, this is a layperson question, are grants kind of like by season, is there like a busy season for
Yeah,
grants?
so, and it depends on the federal grant, but what we're hoping is to get some of the more incremental dollars that maybe art endowment or something like that. So seasonally, in the spring and the fall, our major federal grant this season of reporting and winning and getting your application in. But I think that probably maybe, because remember, at any given time, if you want to say, I want to get out of this relationship, this professional relationship, so maybe you keep an eye on that by a monthly report. So let's just get that monthly report, and you say, this is starting to cost us more than we thought, or more than we're seeing any results for. Let's go ahead and send in notification that we're ready to terminate. Because there's just no way to predict what the results are going to be.
And how much time it's
Yeah, and how
gonna take
much
to
time
get
it's
there,
gonna take.
yeah.
Well, is it based on her contract agreement where it says compensation?
So we're listing some things today in conversation that we will probably want in the agreement.
Well, except for her rate is $75 an hour. So,
But we're instructing her on some benchmarks and some parameters. Like, we want,
a monthly report.
yeah,
Well, and in there it does define a statement of work. So you
Yeah.
have like a
And I
scope
think,
of
did
work.
she give us a sample?
Yes.
And from the scope of work, you kind of lay that forward. I think the opportunities, you know, again, we got a feeling that there's gonna be some reasonable money. It may not be stratospheric, but we do think it's gonna be reasonable.
Yeah, I see the
She has
value.
the experience, and she has the experience in the right places. I think maybe in the statement of work, go after the grants that we go after. Now, if we're paying her to go after grants and we turn everything down, maybe that's a different level of grants we need to find. But certainly, we're hoping it is profitable for both parties, actually.
And there's a difference between, hey, we know this grant is available, let's apply for it, versus go find us a grant that we don't even know about, right? I mean, I've been the grants administrator long enough to know that, you know, this money comes out this time of year, the TE money comes out this time of year, and is it just going and applying what we're telling you to apply for, or is it that portion of research?
And I go back to that statement of work, because it says specifically, the consultant will not exceed specific time
Yeah, there's a
monetary
not
commitments
exceed
without
clause.
express written consent of the client.
Right.
So I think we have more than enough in there.
And it also says consultant will provide monthly invoices, so with the monthly
Invoice, which has a reporting style to it, but we can certainly add invoices and reports.
correct,
If you
so,
want to.
yeah. Just wanting the language to be there so that was clear.
Right.
Yeah, hourly rate for actual time work. Retainer or project or however, how is that? Do we
For
get to
every hour
decide?
she works,
Or does she,
And so, and as I explained the last time, grant professionals do not get paid only when they win. They get paid for the hours they work.
Mhm.
So if she tracks her time.
That's like lawyers.
Thanks, man.
Didn't want to leave you left out. Didn't want to leave you left out.
Well, you said, of course, it sounds familiar.
It's the coffee.
It's the guy.
Any other questions? Because it's on the agenda for approval. You know, like I said, we got enough things in there, we can pull it if we need it. Ms. Dean?
I'm okay with it.
Mr. Clark? Ms. Tran?
We can hear. He's making comments.
You on mute or something? We can't hear you.
I agree with that. We would not go into see the cost, ensure it's cost effective. If not, then we'll figure something out.
All right, Jester's Creek, Transportation Enhancement Project Timeline Amendment. It doesn't sound like a good thing.
Well, it's just, if you remember, more than once, we've discussed the Jester Creek Trails, Phase 3, and we had some soil issues and there were rain issues, and so this is just, we have to acknowledge that they are not going to make their timeline originally set out the bid, and this is just the approval to extend the timeline to basically consider all those delays that we dealt with the soil and the rain.
So have we resolved that soil issue?
I think they said they had.
Yes.
Did they get the second consultant to back up the first consultant?
Well, I don't know that, did, when y'all met out there, you wanna,
We're still talking with Pond. We met out there and we actually pumped the area where the water is coming up. And what we found was water is coming from the surface, beneath the ground. So as we pump, water just continuously is coming up. So we're meeting out there tomorrow with the same consultant, which is us. It's not Pond, it's, can't think of the name of it right now. The second consultant's gonna be on site. We're talking about heavy stone, doing some additional work. We seem to think that we can salvage what we have, but we have to be very creative in how we do that. Then what we're gonna do is present Pond with our our plan going forward of here's what we think we could do to remedy the problem that we have so that we can continue the path. On's gonna have to sign off on that and tell us that, yes, this in fact will work, we do agree with it, and/or they can modify it and add any additional information to it so that it's a workable document between the two engineering firms.
Okay, so the first one is just acknowledging that it's there. The second one is, we obviously still have engineers disagreeing with engineers. Who would have thought?
Well, nobody wants to be on the hook all by themselves.
Correct, that is correct.
And we just don't want it to sink.
Yeah.
We just don't want it to sink.
So
All
are we
good.
still gonna be able to move forward
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
we'll get it done. It just,
eventually?
once the engineering changes, now remember, even in a floodplain,
Yeah,
you can use the spiral sections and build on those. It's just how far down it goes. And it's not a tremendous amount, because you've already got the skyline section that exists, right? So, yeah, I think it was, it probably would be cheap then.
We should have a better idea. As soon as I get that answer, I'll forward it over to the city manager after I visit with on Triscape and Mark Whitley, all three of us and the other engineer firm. We're all gonna meet out there tomorrow, or excuse me, Thursday, and we're gonna pretty much figure it out. We'll come back and share that information.
You know, okay. Timeline change, got it. Okay.
Try not to change that.
So at this point, ordinance 2103, charter amendment to allow the mayor and council to appoint planning and zoning chair. So I think that's coming forward. Any discussions on this?
I think I may have expressed this in a council meeting, but just to make sure, I think the boards, those who serve on the boards, have the full capability amongst the group themselves to appoint the leader, so to speak. So I'll just leave it at that.
Ms. Dean.
I think I agree with her. The only thing is that, as I stated before, I mean, it's an incentive for people to want to serve on the boards and to be able to select who they feel comfortable serving as chair. And the only reason that I would agree to mayor and council would be that if they could not come to an agreement on who they would think that the chair would be, then mayor and council, I think, could vote to select someone. And we're selecting from the board, is that correct?
That's
Yeah.
correct.
I think, for me, having served on the board, I think that it brings a little something when the board members have that, opportunity to select from, the members themselves.
Ms. Tran.
Yes, I did a little survey on this, on the planning and zoning board members, and different board members that function the same way as the board member that we pay. And the result of the survey is that 80% wants to have their own choice to nominate a chairperson because that's the person that they work with, and they work among themselves to figure it out. 10% would agree with the change to have the mayor appoint to appoint chairperson. 10% did not participate in the survey. So I would say, as we would, the board working volunteer at their wish, and we're lucky to have them to get involved in that level. I would say we would work with them to whatever the board members, to the level the board members is feel comfortable, and that will be more productive to help us to approach, as council mayor, to approach our goals. And also another thing is that this have been set in place for a very long time, and this is, if we change this, we make the change on the charter. I would say our job is to protect the charter and we only change the charter when we have to, when it's necessary. That's all I have.
I hear everybody saying it, and both will have their own reason have their own point to that. To be able to select to appoint the chairperson in that position for our own, that would be better. Let me put it this way. Like we have the direction or the way that we want that board to go. That we will have a same agenda instead of have a different direction to fight on, and on the other side of me kind of agree with you guys. So it's easier for the board to select the people who they're gonna work with. So I see the point too. Both sides have their own point, and I'm undecided what, because it's easier for the board member to elect the person who they work with, but it's easier for the council and mayor to appoint a person that for us to work with too. And get to the point, if there is differences, idea between the two elements.
Mine's real simple. If we're going to work within the board itself, then I think I should have the ability to pick the individual that's there that will work the best with me. Just that simple. So the city council is still appointing the board, but it's a lot of energy on my part, and I don't have all the keys that I think I need to be successful to make that work. Pick the right people. It gives me the right opportunity. So I think city council's got to decide it first, but if I'm going to spend that kind of effort, I want to give myself the best opportunity.
Agree to that.
Continuing, mixed use moratorium. As we know, that's our second reading. Any last discussions on that? Yes.
I'm good with it. I think I've stated before, just, we're gonna have the moratorium. We need to actively have those conversations and that movement to make those changes.
Now, we still had some question as to whether there was the multifamily existing.
So, no, the mixed-use ordinance was passed and put in place. It wasn't just in the comprehensive plan or the future land use. So it does create a redundancy because currently, right now, there is no zoning in the city where multifamily can be built.
Even if it's existing.
If they tore it down, they can't build it back.
Yeah.
Right, so basically, I'm not 100% sure I read that at the same time. I have no doubt they passed it. Right? The question is, an implementation for a rezoning of property would be different than an implementation to have mixed use on the corners. And I do worry about what you have. At least in the short term, I don't know that it matters. Does that make sense? I don't think we're under a tremendous amount of stress, but it is just one of those where it's a cleanup measure. We'll be able to figure that out soon enough. And then the second part would come down to, I agree, that from what I can tell, the mixed use ordinance that we have in place is just not built. But we can want it all we want to. But the development community out there has got to have some things that they understand. And I don't know that the ordinance does that. I think it makes it extremely complicated, and I think it's filled with nice ideas, but it's not necessarily practical. We're asking to go from 1976 shopping center, single floor, to basically 5-story towers with, ground floor retail, which is very concrete driven. And then now you take a building that you might be able to build for $5 million, we're gonna be building it for $50 million. That's a stretch. And you gotta be able to give your economic development team a fighting chance, so it doesn't mean, all bets are off. I think this is where this effort's gonna come in, is we've gotta take some tours. And rather than guess at what that potential code could be, we take a tour, then we get the staff to actually go and do the research on the code that was actually allowed. Was it a true master plan development, in which case it came before the city council, we liked what we saw, and that's what we approved. We still have that avenue to us, which is kind of nice. But if somebody's just gonna do just a straight up development, we gotta have something on our books that, maybe it's a supplement, maybe it's an option B, so you can go down this path if you so choose, but here's a second path that might be a little bit easier for you to comply with, because it's a combination of architects, engineers, land planning, and it's gonna get quite intense, and we want to be successful, so we think in a very near future, we're gonna be ready for that, and it's gonna take a minute, right? So can we get our staff to do the tours? Yes. Well, yes, because we're gonna make you do it. But from the standpoint of, we have to have a deliverable. This is a moratorium that only buys us a certain period of time.
Right.
The idea isn't to shut down development in the city. The idea is to use it as an opportunity to get our house in order before somebody else submits. We know for a fact that on the northern section of the city, that there's an actively engaging opportunity up there.
That's what I was gonna ask.
It's pretty far behind. As a matter of fact, I just came from that meeting. It's pretty far behind in engineering. In other words, it's on a much slower train than if it was being paid for by the private sector.
Mhm.
Private sector's got to go.
Right.
These folks, it's more of a government train. It's we'll talk
It's a
about it a long
government,
time and before they get there. So that actually will work to our advantage. But it's still run by the private sector. So that doesn't mean that it might come apart in pieces. So it's not a tabletop exercise for our health. It's one that says maybe. What they're pitching right now is like 7-story buildings, but they have no idea if the ground will even support the 7-story buildings, to give you an idea. So they're gonna do geotechnical.
So let me ask you this, even with we're clear that even our concept drawing that we've discussed for this product, that's, I would think it's certainly within the code as they exist now.
That would not be correct.
That's why I figured I'd ask the question.
That would be correct. You've got higher densities. It allows ownership, but it doesn't say 3 floors and a parking deck. And here's why it's more interesting, is that remember that parking deck was supposed to be 5-story. The reason it's 3 is there's no bedrock right there. The odds are, and we're just like right next to it, that you would not actually be able to build. And we'll know that when we do geotechnical in the future, the odds are. Stone could show up anywhere. We just know where it wasn't. Right? It's everywhere we want to build, nowhere where we need it. But so ours is a little bit more interesting because it creates a lot of density. And then there's even some question as to whether that's the normal parking ratios and all the other things that go with it, even though we got a parking lot. So we're already heading toward, but that'll be a master plan development, right? That'll be something in between that we think will meet some needs. We'll have to find out. But it wouldn't be, it's on 1 acre lot. It would be a very, very complicated bill if somebody was to do that to your current mixed use code. And probably not feasible. It certainly wouldn't be financially feasible. Whether it would actually even stay up would be a good question.
So I guess I do want to make one additional comment. With the conversations that are being had and the potential that exists in that area, as a city, of course, we want development. We've got some concepts that we're taking a look at. I just want to be mindful that we don't kind of, what is the saying, cut off our nose to spite our face, because there are real conversations being had. So let's be progressive with the changes that we make, so that we're kind of waiting in the ready, not working against the interest that's already there.
Well, I think some of the areas you're going to take a tour, the visuals that are being supported by the Northern Project will be similar. this will help us a lot.
We schedule them on a day where I'm not.
Schedule them on a day she's not at work.
But last week we actually scheduled with URA because I wanted to take some photos to take it back to you guys, but it rained out last time. I'll make sure I schedule it.
Okay, thank you,
And
sir.
I got a feeling we'll take several trips, but, you know, and once you see the
I gotta
area.
get a car ride in, you know.
Oh, you're gonna love that.
Man.
But it's, once you see it, you know, it's, you know, we all drive around Metro Atlanta. You know, just like in a residential section, you can drive over and look at a housing, you know, area and kind of get an idea for the feel. Additional questions, Ms. T.
No.
Ms. Tran?
No question.
All right, last item before we get into, make sure it's up there. All right, last one's gonna be basically attorney's powers and duties, and that's just an ordinance change, and that is to facilitate the method, that is used to be able to relate to the city attorney. That discussions, any additional discussions, Ms. Knight?
So I'm a little troubled because I guess for me, we always have this conversation about the speed of business, the speed of government. I'm a little concerned, council vote for communication and requests being voted on in a council meeting, you know, kind of creates a delay for the speed of information that we need to kind of review in preparation. So I would think that we're progressive enough as a council, intelligent enough to kind of come up with some rules of engagement. I mean, I thought we had done that in the sense that we're forwarding information to the city manager. If she creates a memo or if it's an email where we're all copied on, and then we receive the response from, you know, city attorney. I just don't see the need of requiring a vote for communication.
Ms. Dean?
Is that, you mean the vote for a majority from the council?
Yeah, because that's gonna slow us down.
Well, okay, when you said that, we have the questions during the council meeting, and we've been back and forth with this. I think the way that we submit questions to the city manager for the attorney to answer, the attorney submits the questions, the answers back to the city manager, and the city manager distributes that to the council. I mean, that is less time. We all know what has been said because it is going to and from the city manager, not coming directly from a council member. I don't want Renee to submit to the attorney something, and then she says to me, well, the attorney told me. I don't want to hear her telling me what the attorney said. I want it to go through the city manager. The city manager is the person that is responsible for the administrative, and then what comes to us, not a council member. So if we have a problem that we cannot get from the answer, or we're not satisfied, then we take a vote to see if the council wants to move it to a question for, you know, for the attorney to be here, not to just, you know, request that the attorney comes whenever there's an individual question. Let's go through the channel of the city manager, where that's how we work as a council. We go through the city manager.
So I think, to me, and I may be wrong, just clarify for me, it sounds like it's two things that are being rolled into one. Questions to the city attorney and the city attorney coming to meetings, because
There's a little bit of both.
Both.
It's trying to use, develop a format that makes sense.
Right.
There's no one that's not being able to ask a question. We've asked, if you have a question, submit it. Why? Because they do research as much as they have certain skill sets where they can stand on their feet and they debate and trials and all that other stuff. They're issuing a formal opinion about some of the things you're asking for. In
So
which
are you
case they're
saying
gonna write
submit it to the city manager, or
Well, yeah, I'm sorry,
submit it-
it's submitted to the city manager,
Okay.
but that's the question. In other words,
Right.
here's the question that was asked. Okay, then she's gonna answer it, and she's gonna send it back, and we're all going together. So
Right.
we know what it is.
Exactly.
We certainly have the ability in every single council meeting to have an opinion.
Right.
And voice that opinion.
Exactly.
Whether you have the votes to support it or not is a different story. But you do have the ability, and no one has stopped you from doing it. Maybe you don't like the answer, but that's fine, but it is the answer that's been given by legal counsel. I don't like a lot of answers either, but that doesn't mean that, you know, it's gonna change much, right?
So, I guess for my clarity, majority vote of the council, just to submit questions to the
No,
city?
for-
No,
to
you're gonna
have the
submit
attorney
questions,
come.
but if you're gonna have people show up,
Okay,
but it's a
yeah.
format for it, is to say,
So the-
submit the question in writing if that's what you want to do.
Right, so we're saying, you know, this ordinance is changing what? The questions or asking the attorney to
A
appear?
little bit of both. It's giving you a format to ask you questions. You're welcome, the city's attorney's here to ask whatever question you want. That's not stopping that, but it is saying if we think something's gonna get a little dicey, then, I mean, y'all are pretty good about sending information out, so it's not, you know, it's not like we have to wait for this meeting to have a discussion. You know, somebody could basically do a quick poll, you know, yes, I want them, yes, I want them, this, I want them, there it is, you know.
So I'll be the slow kid, you know, just so that I'm clear, because again, advise the mayor, council, its committees, or any city officer when requested by mayor or majority vote of the council on all legal questions arising in the conduct of city business. So majority vote of the council to ask questions?
No, the majority vote of the council to have them sitting here.
Right.
Well,
Conduction
go ahead.
of, not to cut you off, Councilwoman Knight, but conduction of city business is a council meeting.
Okay.
So when you're saying your daily operational questions, or if you have any type of legal questions, that will still go to the city manager.
Okay.
I mean, anytime you have a question, put it in writing, send it to the city manager. That wouldn't change that process as
Okay.
far as having the direct access to ask any questions that you want. But it's just when you have, when you're requesting that I be present, or that I advise formally on the process of the legal, conduction of your business, that all, parties with regard to, you get a majority vote from mayor and council.
Can the ordinance say that?
That's,
The current ordinance already says that questions from the council should be submitted to me.
right.
No, I'm saying, because my confusion, good thing the city attorney was here to clarify. My confusion was conduct of city business, and she just referenced, you know, a moment ago, that technically means meetings.
Technically, when you're conducting a city business as a council, then yeah, it's a meeting.
So, for clarity, I like clarity, I'm just asking, can it say that so that it's clear moving forward beyond even our council?
That's up to you all.
I mean, what do you all think, council?
So you're saying that you
What
want
reads
to,
is this?
to,
6 versus 8.
This is second thing.
Second read.
so what are you, you're saying you want this to read?
No,
differently?
because as I'm reading it, I'm thinking, you know, it's saying upon all legal questions arising in the conduct of city business. My mind was like, okay, so we're having to take a vote on asking questions to the city attorney. And I'm being told, no, that's not the intention of what this is meaning. This is meaning for the appearance of the attorney at meetings. Well, me reading this in this way doesn't give me that interpretation, doesn't give me that understanding.
Could I understand what is the purpose of this changing? Why are we making this change on our charter?
It's relatively simple, Van. You know, if we consistently are asking for all the members to follow a certain procedure, and they don't do it, then it's all over the board. And it just says, we've asked for it to be followed a certain way, it's not being followed that certain way. We've had this discussion in open session at this council, where we basically said that we're going to codify it. And the method that we've chosen in terms of how you communicate with members of the city staff as well as the city attorney are supposed to be codified in this as a solution. In other words, it's no longer a general suggestion, it's telling you how to do it.
Okay, and and I would assume we're trying to do that to be cost effective so we be informed on the legal advice on decisions the council is going to make without spending too much of the public fund.
A combination plus a path. In other words, we
Okay.
know the question that's being asked. We know where it's at, right? It's going to the city manager, it's gonna go to the city attorney, it's gonna come back, and it's gonna be sent to all of us. So when they have it, you have it.
Okay, so I have two questions for the city attorney. So have you reviewed this change in the charter?
I have, and it's not the charter, as I understand, this is, it's the code of ordinances.
Yes, and is this your suggestion of the change based on the common practice that you serve in other local government, or you make the changes by somebody else direction?
Well, these changes, I didn't initiate these changes, but if you're asking if the practices with regards to how local governments operate with regards to their city attorney, it's relative to each local government. For example, one thing that is normally a general practice of all the counties and all the cities that I represent is you have one point of contact within that county or that city where all of it is processed. So for example, my other cities, I go through the city manager, they give me the direction of whatever the council has with regards to any kind of legal questions, any kind of opinions. So that process with regards to having one key person to talk to with regards to legal advice or with regards to receiving directions or questions from council is very, very common and popular not only with the cities, but also your county governments as well. Attendance at meetings is strictly up to the council and the city body. So some of the cities will say, we only need you at this particular meeting, Luana, and that's totally up to that city on when that attorney is going to appear, because again, we're providing a public service for the entire council and not just one person. So that's generally a decision that council will have to make.
So you're saying that you did not initiate this practice, and
I
you
did.
got that somebody else initiated that?
I did.
Okay, so I would like to have a little better understanding. What is the difference between the committee and board?
What is the difference between what committee and board?
Yes.
I'm sorry?
I think she's just asking the difference between the two.
Between a committee and a board?
Yes.
I'm not understanding, you're saying your council members or, because a committee is just a specialized group that is collectively appointed to decide on an issue. A board is usually an appointed body that covers a range of specified tasks. So are you saying within the council?
If she's going by technical
Yes.
terms, I think
But
she-
that's
But a technical term is I appoint all committees. Right? The boards would be the planning and zoning board, which is basically a recognized board. We know we have some intergovernmental agreements between the
Right.
RA and the DEA. And in some cases, they have separated council. In some cases, well, in this case, we don't have single council, we have separated council below.
Okay. So with regards to the appointment of that, that's totally different, but the actual definition of the committee and a board is usually a committee is within an existing body that makes a decision based on a specialized area, and a board again is an appointed body of members who are performing a specialized task.
Thank you. And let's see. So the majority vote is have to be done at the open meeting. Am I correct?
A majority vote of council will have to take place at a public meeting, yes ma'am.
Okay. So help me to understand this sentence in the changing of this the thing that we trying to make. Advise the mayor, council, its committees, or any city officer when they're to requested by mayor a majority vote of the council upon all legal questions arising in the conduct of the city business. You said if we pass this and put this new changes in practice, explain, help me to understand where in this wording saying that the council is still able to reach out to the city attorney through the city manager to raise the question without the authority, the permission of the mayor and the majority vote of the council.
If you go on the second page, it's subsection 3. And it says give their, second page, it's paragraph 3. Council, it says give their opinion upon any legal matter or question submitted to them by the city manager, mayor, or a majority vote of the council, So if there was a legal question that's submitted to the city manager would then transmit that question to legal counsel as you all stated, and then I will do an opinion letter and disseminate it to all members, or I'll disseminate it back to the city manager, and she will then disseminate it to all members of mayor council.
So where this section showing that any council can raise the question through the city manager, but not have to go through the majority vote of the council.
Give their opinion upon any legal matter or question submitted to them by the city manager, mayor, or a majority vote of council. So if you had a question and you submitted that to the city manager, you could submit that to the city manager in writing, and they will submit that to me. Or if council as a whole had a majority, as a majority had an issue that they would like vetted through our office, they could then reach out to the city manager to have me answer that legal question as well.
So I just want to have the clarification on this sentence, that you're saying that any council has a question, they can raise the question to the city manager, and the city manager will reach out to the city attorney, and the answer back to the city manager, and that answer being shared among all the council?
Yes, ma'am, that's my understanding of the practice.
I have a question. When a council member submits something to the city manager, shouldn't the city manager share that with the other council members so that we'll know what's in question?
Yeah.
So therefore, you share with,
I mean,
because I might.
You can handle it 2 ways. I mean, I would assume that that's correct, but if I'm sending it out and I'm asking a question, we already CC each other on a number of things anyway. Most of those are getting sent to everybody, including the administrative staff.
Because I'm
In the
saying,
event
before
that
it goes
somebody's
to the
getting
attorney.
missed. Now, I did see something the other day where they left the city manager out, which was kind of pointless, because you asked.
But no, I mean, the question that a council member has is saying to the city manager, if we know what the question is, we might have something that we want to add to it
Sure.
before she sends it to the attorney, instead of us back and forth, If there's something that I want to add to a council member's question
That's fine.
before it goes to the city attorney, then we would know what's being asked, and that way, if you have something to add, or you have an additional question about that
We just
subject.
don't have 10,000 questions we're
Right.
asking on a regular basis, so we're kind
Exactly.
of getting into the weeds here a little bit. We're just trying to come up with a road, a lane that says follow
Right,
this lane.
exactly.
I think everybody's had the ability to ask questions at any level. I don't anticipate that changing dramatically. All we're saying is follow the lane. So that gives the information to everybody. Any other questions, Ms. Tran?
So, yes, so are you sure that item 1 and the item 3 are not conflicting each other? Because one is saying that the city attorney advised council, the mayor is committing any city officer. And then the other one say gives the opinion. So if one yes, the council, what is committee, and the city officer raise the question. And the other, the number 3, is to say the city attorney giving the opinion upon any legal matter present. So those two contradict themselves.
I don't think so. I don't think they contradict themselves because there could be legal questions that are not directly related to the operation of city business as far as it would be impactful either on an agenda in a public meeting or with the operations for the city of Morrow. It may just be a legal question that you have with regards to your duties and responsibilities. I mean, it might not necessarily be directly something that affects the agenda or the active business of the city. And so therefore, number 3, I think is an overarching ability for you to still, or for council members to still, if you have those legal questions, to direct them through the city manager for resolution, such that everybody will have the opportunity to have access to that answer.
Mayor, quick question. So does this pertain to the council for the DMO and stuff like, and the committees for that board as well?
This is only for
For council.
council,
Okay.
mayor and council.
Technically, it's a separate board.
It's a separate board, it is.
Okay.
Mhm.
Other questions, Ms. Tran?
Yes, and what are the actions need to be done in a hearing?
What are the actions that need to be done in a hearing? What type of hearing?
Like this hearing. Well, the first hearing is the chairperson.
The first hearing is basically an introduction of the ordinance. That's a first
A
reading.
first read, okay, so we call it first reading, okay. So usually the first read is are you saying the first read and the difference between those two? The first read is generally I don't wanna cut you off, but the first read is usually the introduction of the, ordinance, on the agenda, such that you can look at it. If there are comments that need to be made, sometimes you can take comments, sometimes you don't, just depending on the format of the agenda. And then the second read will be the second time that it formally comes before the body, for motion, second, and discussion and passage.
So we look like we have the consent agenda. So with our form of the agenda, what action needs to be done in the first hearing?
The presentation of the proposed amendment or ordinance to the body. That's the first thing that you do for the first read.
Do we need to explain what changes are going to affect briefly?
What do you mean?
I mean, would the chairperson need to require to explain what the meaning of that change is going to be in the first reading, or just reading the summary of the ordinance?
Not necessarily. Usually what's required is that you place the description of what is in the ordinance on the agenda with regards to what change it's gonna affect. And then with the second read is when you actually go into the discussion portion of that. So if there are any ambiguities after the first motion, second, then you call for the discussion, and at that time you can discuss those nuances before it is voted on for passage.
Plus, everything that's in front of the city council is sitting on a back chair somewhere, and it's available through the city clerk. It's a public record, and the meetings are public.
Okay, and so with this changing, it changed the charter of the change in mayor authority. So it's changing in the mayor appointing the chairperson in planning and zoning, or the changing what changed the government body.
Okay, you're talking
Okay,
about two different things.
Okay, so are you speaking on the ordinance change? Because that doesn't have anything to do with the,
All of the changes that we can, any of them make the change in the government body.
No, Are you talking about the governmental structure for the city?
Well, I'm just trying to get an understanding because if we use state home rules to change our charter, we are not able to use that if we change in the government's money.
Correct, we're not changing the structure of our, what you're asking is the structure and formation of our government, of your government, city government has to be approved by the legislature. There are no substantive changes to your formation or form of or structure of government posed by the charter amendment that you're speaking of, the previous charter amendment, nor the ordinance, because this is not this is not a charter amendment with regards to the city attorney. This is an ordinance amendment.
So, if someone wants to amend a motion, how do they do that?
If someone wants to amend a motion, generally what happens is the original motion is called on the agenda. There's a motion, there's a second. There's generally a discussion. If it makes motion and second, then there's a discussion. If during the discussion, there is a desire to change, then there has to be a motion to amend the motion that's already been motioned and seconded. And there has to be a motion and second on the motion to amend, and then a vote on that.
Okay, I'm a little bit confused. I don't think I grasp it. So, so after the motion being called, then somebody make the motion to amend the motion.
No, ma'am.
Then
The original motion has to be called on the agenda, then that original motion has to be motioned and seconded. If that, the original motion is motioned and seconded, that motion is now active on the agenda for a vote and discussion. If during the discussion, there is a desire to amend the original motion, then there needs to be a motion to amend that original motion after it has been motioned and seconded. After the motion to amend has been moved and seconded, then you can amend the original motion on a majority vote.
The amendment request, the amendment of the motion has to be requested after the original motion being second during the discussion related to that motion?
Yes, ma'am. Generally, that's how it is, unless there's a waiver of the Robert's Rules of Order.
Thank you.
And that has to be done that has to be approved by all council members prior to the vote.
Okay, so I have two more questions and that will be it. So after the contractor is granted a job with the city.
Wait a minute, I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said. After the
contractor is granted a job with the city, is that contractor required to obtain permit with the city?
After the contractor is granted a job with the city,
Is
are
that
they
contractor required to obtain permit?
what type of job and what type of permit?
I mean, it's like construction job or any job that help us understand when we need it, what type of job would we need, what we need. First of all, do we need it, what case that we need, what case we don't?
Okay, so if we look back to the memo that I did back on, let's go through that really quickly, Mayor, if that's okay. If you're saying licensure, which is different from a permit, it depends on what type of job that you would need a permit for the city based on the city's building codes. So that will be specific to each job. But if you're talking about licensure of the contractor themselves, then that's set forth in the state law under 4341-2. and it places different standards for residential contractors and general contractors regarding what they would need with regards to licensure. So if you're talking about someone who's doing specialized work such as HVAC, electrical work, or structural development, or those who are doing larger jobs within the state procurement threshold amount that exceeds over $100,000, then yes, they have to be licensed. And depending on what work they're doing, they have to obtain city permits to comply with the city codes. But it just depends. That's a very broad question, so it really depends on the type of work they're doing.
I see. So if the work that they're doing require to get the permit by the city code, does that contractor need to obtain the permit?
If a permit is needed for a particular work within the city, then a permit has to be obtained.
Thank you. And my last question, I'm going to share my screen real quick. Okay, that's not what I wanted to share. Give me a second, I'm sorry, I'm clumsy, but I'm trying to get it right here. Okay, this was related to the DMO that's few months in the past. So when I asked the city manager to relay the message to you with the question that if the city could have a provision to appoint less than 50% of the board members of the DMO, the advice that the response I got from the city manager relaying is that it would be legal if no board votes to have by law, and after the agreement with the city is in place. Could you explain to me why should we have the agreement in place if the city wish to have that provision to have the council have less than 50% of the provision on the DMO board?
Okay, so I want to make sure that I understand your question. Regarding the DMO board, you're asking me if it's legal to have 50% of the DMO board. Say that again?
Well, my response that I got from the question is that could the city have the practice of having the mayor and council have the provision on appointed less than 50% of DMO board members?
Okay, hold on, stop, okay, 1 second. So the first part of your question is, could the city have the mayor and council appoint 50% of the DMO member, of the DMO members, or the DMO board?
The DMO board member. Has that question ever been raised to you?
Yes, and the answer to that question is the DMO board members, the selection of the DMO board is governed by the bylaws for the DMO. So that is totally separate from mayor and council. If you look at the bylaws of the DMO, it speaks as to how those board members are selected. And so with regards to can you override those bylaws, the answer to that is no, you can't. And the reason why it's not, it's generally separate, it's a separate entity. And for tax purposes, you have to maintain separation from the city with regards to that, because I think they're a 501c6 organization, and so they have their own rules and regulations with regards to bylaws and the appointment of their board members. And so to act contrary to that would be in violation of what we did for the organization of the DMO.
but if the council has a provision in less than 50%, it's not in a violation, and several other cities in Georgia have that practice.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, but that each council, each city, each council and city has their own DMO, and I'm sure they're going by their bylaws for their particular DMO. So if their DMO allows for their council to make that selection, then that's on, that's their personal decision. But the DMO bylaws here did not allow for the 50% selection of that. The formation documents, as far as the bylaws, set forth how the board members are to be chosen, and that's what we went by with regards to the appointment of those and the installation of those officers.
So I am confused. Why would we got the advice that if that is something we wish to have, we need to sign the contract first, and then after that, have the DMO have more vote to make changes in their bylaw? If that's like they are kind of separate from us and we're doing the contract, if that is something we wish, why wouldn't we have a practice of putting that term in the contract to have DMO have obligation to do that instead of encourage us to sign the agreement first?
Okay, in order for me to represent you, the contract that you're speaking of is not the bylaws. There was a joint representation agreement that council had to review and approve in order for me to act as the attorney for the DMO, as well as the attorney for as the city attorney as well. In drafting that is a normal practice throughout the state. I mean, most city attorneys help with the formation of the city's DMO unless there's a difference. The law requires, though, that because that entity is a subordinate entity that may have adverse issues that may come up later on down the line, that I inform both parties that I am a city attorney, and if there is any litigation between the two entities, that I will represent the city. So before I can even get into joint representation, the city had to agree to that, as well as the DMO had to, or representatives from the DMO had to agree to that. So the agreement that you're talking about had nothing to do with the formation documents. The agreement that you're talking about is a joint representation letter. With regards to the makeup of the DMO, though, that is purely up to the bylaws and the formation documents for the DMO. And that's separate from the city.
The agreement we're talking here, and I got what you mean, that we have to sign the agreement, the document to authorize the DMO paperwork. The agreement here means that the agreement, the contract between the city and the DMO. That's why I have the concern. If that is something that we wish to have that practice, why wouldn't we got it in the contract term to have DMO board working with, make sure that would happen instead of asking us to sign the agreement between the city with the DMO first?
With regards to the terms of that agreement, it went before full council. So if that was something that council wanted to change or amend with regards to the DMO contract, or with regards to, I think you're talking about the formation documents and approval of that, that would be something that full council would have to request, vote on, and approve in order for that to be a term of the contract. For example, when you're talking about the funding agreement, that's what you're talking about with regards to formation. There was a provisions added to say that they want you all wanted to enhance reporting requirements and things of that nature. So that was amended, and other things like that were amended. With regards to so I'm just making sure, with regards to the joint representation letter, which is the initial contract, that is so that I can represent both the DMO and the city. With regards to the formation documents and the approval of the DMO itself, those terms were, presented and approved by council in their totality. So with regards to if there were any other provisions or anything like that, if it was if it was not presented with the bylaws, that's the terms that the DMO, that's kind of like their operating Bible, and that is the terms they presented to the city for approval, and it was approved by city council. So that's something that's something that was approved by council, and that's binding at this point.
Yeah, the agreement reference in this email wasn't the formation document, because that formation document is the authorized city attorney to represent DMO have already signed at the moment at the time that we raised that question. I'm just being curious because I never got the full understanding on why, if that is a practice that we could have, and if that is something that we would have the desire to have, why wouldn't we have in a term in the agreement between the city and the DMO to make sure that would happen? We understand that the change has to be made by DMO or not the city, but instead we have to advise that the agreement between DMO and the city have to put in place.
Correct. Correct, because I believe that in looking at the formation documents and the ordinance that authorizes the formation of the DMO, as it stands, it did not have that 50% requirement, appointment requirement, and so you can't go after the fact and then put that as a requirement when there was a entry of that agreement. So I'm not really clear on if, and I would have to go back and see if that was something that you raised during and it was not approved by all council members. But if it was not incorporated in the finalized approval ordinance or joint agreement, then that could not be a provision that we could put in them, because that's not a part of their bylaws. And the appointment of their board, again, was established in their bylaws, which was part of the DMO. They set their own bylaws because they're a totally different tax entity.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, for all the trustee and the consultant, the woman getting the legal advice. So, with this change with the change that we're trying to make, I would like to say, I recommend that instead of having all the confusing languages to where it's really like technical boring, I would say for our purpose of the reducing of the cost and prevent duplication of questions raised by different council, and make sure all the council gets the legal advice to do our job, to make sure that we make the decision in compliance on rules and regulations. I would say we modify it to be all communication with the city attorney must be made to the city manager and must share among all council members, instead of all the language that we have here in this ordinance.
Any other questions, Ms. Tran?
That's all questions that I have.
Mark, anything related to attorney's powers and duties? Question I've got for the city manager, I've got two additional things here. One is related to the Morrow Police Department for vehicles, and then the other one was related to the COVID section. Does that need to be added to the agenda?
Yes, we would request that you approve the agenda with the amendments to add the vehicle replacement. And I emailed this out to you after the insurance. Our cost, and this is for a vehicle that was wrecked, our cost would be $20,057.39. We'd ask that you approve that vehicle replacement. And then the information that we just got yesterday from the U.S. Department of Treasury for the Corona local and state fiscal recovery funds, the mayor would have to execute this document to put us in a position to receive our portion of the recovery money.
Excellent. Any reason we can't put that on the consent agenda this night?
No, I'm looking for the information.
The mayor, you don't have a consent agenda, it's just approval of the.
Approval of.
So you could add them
We'll
as
just add the
business,
separate-
new business item,
We'll just
5
take
and
it.
6.
Okay.
So you'd have to.
No problem.
Put
We
the
can have it there.
agenda.
Not a problem. Any issues with having it on the agenda? Got it. Ms. Dean?
No problem.
Wow. Ms. Tran?
I'm good.
Okay, now let me forget that. We're gonna take about a 3-minute break and then we'll go into the regular session for the second. We got a couple things. All right, one, which is big for everybody that's still standing out there. If you got the tax notice in the mail from the county, all right, it is missing the homestead exemption, okay? So when it looks like we just took a whole bunch of your money, we didn't. You know, so it's important to look at the actual fair market value of your house and realize that it wasn't just a mistake that was in the Morrow section, they made a couple others as well. So my understanding is they're gonna resend those out. There'll be a lot of clarification that goes with it. And remember, that's just a notice, so it's not there. However, if you do not agree with the fair market value portion of it, we would strongly encourage you to file the appropriate appeals to the Board of Equalization. And we are aware through this, I know that through some chaos comes good things. I'm aware of at least 2 senior citizens in this city that have turned the age of 65 that aren't required to pay the school tax, but haven't filed the exemption. So is it going to be easy enough to be able to reach out to them and do the conversation we've already had and go, you have to, and it's not like they turned, 65,000 years ago. It's just, that they don't have to pay the school tax, and that's a bonus. So there are some things that work.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to say one thing. They will not be sending out new valuations unless the fair market value is incorrect. I spoke with Ken Petaway today, and he said because it involves the entire county, that they would only send a new one if it was a fair market value. They are still working on it. They have a new software system, and that's what happened throughout the entire county.
Well, I stand corrected.
Well, no, because that was not the first message we got. The
Right.
first message we
Mhm.
got
Yeah.
was that they were gonna mail it out again.
Correct.
So
That
what I
is
hear you
correct.
saying is, that's not the case, which means we need to change the language of that newsletter
Mhm.
before we mail it.
Yeah, well, like I said, I called him because I knew, we were meeting tonight, and he said only if the fair market value was incorrect. But that they are working on it, and that it will be correct.
And as long as Melanie's standing there, I'm glad you're still alive, Melanie. Our house got hit by lightning over this last week. We saw some pictures on there, it looked pretty extensive. And, the good news is you got a little lucky, or you must be living right or something. But we're glad you're still here.
Thank you. Me too.
But
Lightning would have struck me.
Probably. I just wanted to update, what I had learned from Mr. Petaway, so.
Okay, that works. Okay, a couple of things that we just kind of go through there. We got some things moving, and because we've got at least the chairman of the URA here, I want to kind of bring this up, so it's kind of gets you in the thought process for this. Is we have a number of different properties. Now, years ago, we came up with a business plan. Basically, we transferred some assets. There was some liabilities that were transferred as well. Let's just say not all of those business models were followed, right? They've divested of some properties, they've knocked down some properties. In other words, those business models are shot. So I had a conversation with the URA attorney. I've kind of kept them at arm's length for the last year. And kind of now we're at that level where we're getting interest in these properties. In other words, we know we have 3 letters of intent. We know we have a 4th one for the bottom floor. And at some point, we're going to have it. So we have a lease that was approved to form, and that was by the city attorney. We have that same lease was given to Greg for him to review. But one of the things that I'm going to ask for, and this is going to take some cooperation, some of the things we were talking about, is because the business models are shot, the city is basically picking up 100% of the liability. In other words, we're making the payments on everything. We're paying your insurance, we're paying the bond services, we're paying everything. To make it so it's relatively clean, I'm I'm gonna ask those organizations to basically, deed those properties back over to the city for us to handle them, okay? Now, remember, we have certain rules that we have. In other words, I can't negotiate with Dorothy on her own. City attorney says she will not use it. That's what the development authority is for, or the URA is for, depending on what it is. Once we have them back, then, or we made the adjustments that are necessary, and that could be everything from breaking them up to do all these other things, then we will deed them back to an organization. At this particular moment, it looks like the URA holds the possession of the vast majority of them, but it's not just give it back. It's give it back with a business model that supports it, right? Just like the first time, except this time, we can't afford to really go off the range too much. We gotta be able to sit there and go, this is your business model. This is what we're looking for, right? And that solves a couple of things. It makes it easier for us to move and do what is necessary. And then ultimately, and I got a feeling it's gonna be the URA, but it may not be, might be reasons. But I think the URA has almost all of the same requirements that the DDA has. The URA has a smaller number of people, they're very active. Our DDA it may not even have a quorum, and that can make life complicated, because then it's like, how do we put somebody on there? The first thing we ask you to do is divest of stuff that's gonna make us look kind of fishy. So you'd rather just say, let's clean it up, and then let's come up with a plan, and then let's give it back. So they have an understanding, etch a sketch, right? Whatever was happening, that's not working. Let's etch a sketch it, start over, and say, here is an asset, and here is hopefully a cash producing property. And some of that will be in the district, some of that may be related to the dark space, because there's a lot going on. So it's only temporary, it won't stay in your hands very long. But that being said, questions? Ms. Mayor?
Man, that was a lot.
That's a lot.
So much so that I wouldn't be able to formulate a good conversation about my thoughts. If there's any supplemental information that can be provided, I think we already do have a list of properties, in the city. Roll that out so that we can see the roster, have a little bit better understanding of what you're referencing, so that we can have a more fleshed out conversation than within the next 5 minutes.
Well, right now it's just a heads up, but this is gonna roll pretty fast.
Yeah, roll out the information so we can see it.
That was my question, the time frame that we need to.
If we're gonna move on some of these, the thing of it is our timeframe's pretty slow. Well, some of these folks really wanna start to move. In other words, let's say Vanquish from the Red House, for example. He's got real money in a bank, and he believes he could open tomorrow, and it doesn't matter if we leave the district exactly as it sits. He's happy with that, he's willing to take a risk. It's already got pretty much everything in it, and it basically says, let's work out something that makes sense. Once he knows exactly how this place is gonna, he's gonna have to spend some money for some plans and some other things to figure it out. And then just like everything else, he's gonna have to hire a contractor to do it.
Deeding back requires a council vote.
But you're gonna have to accept it on this thing, and they're gonna have to give it, that I'm sure. But the idea is to try to make it clean, and then we all get to kind of understand it as it goes through. Questions?
No, I think I would like to just kind of have a synopsis of everything that we're gonna be,
Well, the ones that are city-owned, which is gonna be the Reynolds Road property, that one will probably stay in the city's hands up until at some point we have the full plan. Again, we met with some folks today who seem to have an interest in some film abilities, and some of the things they were looking for was leasing space. We know that would be complicated from the city standpoint again, so, we ask an economic development team to bring us options. Well, we now have those options. And it's not to say that every one of them is going to be a home run. In some cases, we have more than one interest. Right now, we have to kind of decide, do we pick you or do we pick them? And which one is the strongest and has the potential to add value to the district? And that's not even shopping it super hard yet. So now we have this lot, but without a potential lease. All we're doing is talking. And
And if I may, mention, so just to clarify, with the Reynolds Road, we can lease to a tenant because you own the space if y'all agree to it, approve the lease. But because, no, you don't own the district, you can't let this person come in and sign a lease because you don't own the property.
Well, I think a leasing to the private sector from a public sector standpoint as a city, I don't think I get to pick and choose.
So it depends on the ownership, and if you have a joint, or a joint agreement between the URA for those properties, do you?
Well, this one
He's
is.
talking about like if it's ours and we want to lease it.
Yes, you can. As far as if it is your property, if it's city-owned property?
That's correct.
Yes, you can.
So I can negotiate with the private sector, I don't have to do this at the courthouse.
No, not private sector.
It is a private sector. That's what we're talking about.
Okay.
So a portion of that building is gonna have to come back in.
It's gonna have to go through
as well.
the URA or your DDA in order to do that private sector deal.
Yeah. So again,
So, yeah.
we have, and that was relatively just fell in our lap, if you will. Trying to get some additional marketing for some of the events that we're promoting. And it's kind of like, what would you charge us for this magic ability? And I was like, I don't know if I want money, I might want space. And they're like, well, I have space, but.
Promoters, marketers, those kinds of things.
Okay.
And it's a film type of thing, right?
Okay.
So it's not like my art district is, crazy. I can have a film makes sense. And if you just need that, and he has some qualifiers in there, they want to teach veterans and others.
Job skills in the film
Job skills to
industry.
be able to do it in that industry, which sounds fine. But he has an immediate need for classroom space. We have classroom space and space, so it's just a matter of saying, but I realize to make that happen, it's
You
not
have to
going to
go
be
through
quite that
what
simple.
it is, yeah.
Well, right now, the air conditioning doesn't work, or if it does, it's minimal, right? So I don't know that you want, the space I have at, 95 degrees. But that's part of the plan of moving it forward. And it just says that we don't want to lose all the opportunities. I mean, we paid to get these, leads, and even if we can materialize half of them, that's a pretty big deal. And that way, we now suddenly get live bodies that are out there promoting businesses as well. So, Mr. Clark, Miss Tran.
No comment?
Okay. As long as we got the chairman of the URA sitting here, I'm certain you're gonna agree with everything I just said.
I do. I mean, we have to.
I'm gonna get you a cup of coffee.
We should move Morrow forward, because that's to our benefit, all the citizens.
It is, and if we get you a business model where it supports it, like I said, that it has to happen.
So, sounding redundant, I already know, but talking about the district and understanding we've got, letters of intent, viable businesses for the entertainment district as we reference it. I did have an opportunity to speak, with one of the owners of the Savoy, and their interest in expanding businesses in the city. And so I just want to reiterate, wanting to understand, without just simply saying, you stand in the middle of the district and you can see what needs to be done, understanding what truly needs to be done so that we can achieve the true cleanup. One of the comments made was.
We had some discussions today related to that, and I got a generic version. And now this is where there's the difference between the have to and the want to, right? You have to have windows and doors. That's kind of the bit.
So that was where I'm.
Right, so those numbers with today's cost increases, it's a little subjective. So you're gonna see, the numbers that aren't, super great. That's just a fact, okay, but that's fine. And then you have the gravel lot, for example, that's more of a want to, right? We can park on it, and who's gonna stop us? It doesn't mean in the future that you might not have a change as other things come on. But that one doesn't, require like a set of windows. To make that work, we can make a lot of things happen. And I realize as you go forward, but let's take these business models forward. We have succeeded in, picking up properties, and we have succeeded in coming up in some cases with ideas. But without getting into, all the things that happened in the past, I can't say that we've necessarily succeeded with exit strategies that in some cases even made a bit of business sense, right? If you just flush an idea just to get nickels on a dollar, that was not what we got into it for. And irrespective of whether you like it or not, the bottom line is you gotta come up with an exit that's just as good as the entrance. So we have to complete the wheel, and that means some of this has to be sold. It has to be fixed, right? We go and we pick up a mess, we sell it for the right reasons. And if we have to put terms on it or deed restrictions on the property, so be it, which we should in some cases. But then it goes back into the private sector. Then we take those funds and we apply them somewhere else. So it's not always our dime. Does that make sense? So it's that reoccurring revenue, which is really nice, but at some point there is a sale, and the sale has to make sense. It's very difficult to buy your own restaurant in the city. Almost doesn't exist. You know? So what is the price of having the only one? Good question. You know? I'd love to find out. You know? But first, we just need to get some things moving. But I think that is coming. And then remember, we have 20, let's just use the district, that seems to be pretty hot and heavy, but you know, we have 22 developable lots out there. Seriously. We own some up in the other district, but we don't have a code that's really gonna allow somebody to build on it. And without that, I think that makes that property complicated. In other words, we can advertise it and somebody can say, I'll be happy to build my McDonald's. But that's not what you want. So, and we already know we had that interest. We could have sold it to a pharmacy already. Doesn't meet your code, but we could have sold it. So it's not that we can't get development. We just can't get the development that we want. Yeah. I don't want to say can't, let's just say it's a little mud, right? So,
Question, Mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
On the district property itself, are we all cleared on that as far as the legalities, you know, the?
well, we know we have
easement
egress
and-
issues. The good news for somebody like me is I'm 100% confident we'll solve the problem. You know, if they're gonna be so bold as to say the entire 23 acres is worth $850, that's a fact. Both parcels, $850 each. They went to the county and got that appealed, and they're saying that a total of 40 acres is worth $1,600, almost $1,700. I got a feeling it will cost us more to do the research. And then now let's say to that person, and you have now seen that visibility open up to I-75. You know, everything else you've got is hidden. This city, by itself, has opened up your visibility to I-75. And the last little stretch you have is the spot we have in common. And we can easily show you the pictures where we had it completely down to the creek level in 2010. You would have to be insane not to want that visibility, or just trying to get food. So I think because we've already moved on it, in other words, in terms of producing it, not just talking about it, but actually doing it, plus we have some other things moving, which I think they're very happy to have. I think that will make that relationship better. But they're still looking at, I think we can't get into the courthouse until the end of June or something.
Right. The courthouse has stipulations on when you can do title research. Because of COVID, they closed certain areas of the deed room and everything like that.
That's right. But it's not,
So the bridge and all of that,
you're gonna have the ability to do what you need to do. We have to, we have a process, I
We have a
understand we have a
process,
process.
yeah.
But, you know, it would be reasonable to say that we can be victorious in this discussion with limited damage.
So with that being said, and driving down the highway a little bit, we still as council need to understand so that we can remain attractive and progressive. We still want a quantifiable number.
It's coming. The back deck, you know, they're you know, an engineer playing safe basically says, you know, you gotta take it all off and start. That's a steel beamed deck, and you're going, I think that's unreasonable.
So that'll go on the list.
It is on this.
Okay, good, so.
But
well,
we might take that apart differently. We might say, remove the top board so you can actually see what you're working on. And maybe somebody else would disagree with you in terms of, you know, the support mechanisms in there. And, you know, I've been under that section, and I'm not gonna say that it doesn't have some failure, but I would absolutely disagree that, you could park a car on that steel beam, come on, I mean, I think there are limits now. I'm not an engineer.
Mention something else, throwing out something that,
I was on my best behavior.
oh, good. And something that has been a conversation topic with regard to Mount Zion Road. I would like, I'm all about signs and signage. We're addressing signs on, coming off the interstate. I believe there's an opportunity for us to have some specialty signage on Mount Zion Road, which is our retail district, retail corridor, and an opportunity for signage at the district, because that's our entertainment district. Something very simple. We always talk about low-hanging fruit, you know, on the council. But I just want to toss that out there as an idea because, you know, we have that ability as a city to identify different areas of our city. We're naming them, you know, just kind of moving that forward in a visual way.
Agreed. It's one of the few things, I don't say we can control, but we're having those discussions today. You know, so everybody wants to talk about social media. You know, 100,000 people saw your page and nobody called you on the phone. And that's hard. It's hard for the local businesses. It's hard for our events. How can we, in car show, for example, I gotta go regional. These people can't support themselves on 2,000 people showing up to an event. They've got to have 15,000, 20,000. That's what shows up at big malls and things like that, or the Yellow Daisy Festival. We would go down the list, and that's the charge we're giving. Because we can draw 500 people on our own. You know, how can you give me, you know, that super regional? What would you do different?
So let's name it. Let's put the signage out there. Let's name it. You know, Mount Zion Road is our commercial corridor. It's our commercial district. Let's put signs out there and, you know, demonstrate this is, you know, this is what it is. The district, it's our entertainment district. You go to various cities, they've got banners on the poles. Atlanta, you know, all of the names of the neighborhood, whether it's Buckhead, you know, Midtown, you've got, what is it, Sono that's popped up more recently, south of North Avenue, Castleberry Hill. I mean, we have that opportunity to do that as well.
Well, especially if we have the ability to land that civic center, they're gonna want that. And I think if we think about it in advance, we've got some product.
What would you like to call it?
Oh my God.
Let's spot some locations.
Yeah, let's
That makes
let it
sense.
marinate.
And let's look at it from a city. We got north up here, City Hall. Obviously, what we were doing down there, Mount Zion made sense. Obviously, the interstate. We're trying to. We're not working with a different billboard company now, right?
Yeah, Lamar said 5,000 is it's not 5,000 on both sides, so now we're looking at other options like said, the district billboard itself. No longer a I-75 billboard, it has to be like a city's billboard.
You mean Lamar is saying that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they measure the sign from days in, that's their sign, and
They're not interested in an additional investment on the interstate. So, again, that's one company.
That's
The
one.
other company said no.
Tomorrow, we
Now
got
it's time to meet with
another
somebody
meeting
else.
with one Georgia Outdoor, which built the one off the highway right there in front of Brewery Inn. They built
Which
that.
company are we dealing with that we own the property?
No, that's what he's talking, you talking about, that's what he's saying, Georgia Outdoor,
Is
which
that
is
the
where
one
it
that's
has the
already
one
on our
that says
property?
eat, shop, and stay, or whatever?
Yeah. So that's one that we own the property underneath, right? When's that lease up?
I mean, it's years, but they change it, you know, a certain number of times.
That's not the kind of leverage I'm looking for.
Yes,
My leverage is, you already own 2 on my property.
it's years, I mean, I will,
They,
I'll look at it.
they
Have a
sold
good
it.
discussion with me, I think, on another opportunity, because we're such good partners.
Yeah, they
Little
actually.
leverage, that's helpful, right?
Yeah, they actually sold it, but now he's happy that we called, so he wants another relationship, so he wants maybe opportunity.
Oh, so we sold the other one?
So the Georgia Outdoor, that's the one that Kathy has her brand on, yeah, they sold it.
Well,
So now,
Well, he was helpful the last time, and he obviously understood well, because we got into an agreement. But it's digital, I have to have digital. All right, yes.
Just start naming stuff.
Something. Questions, Ms. Dean, related to this? Ms. Tran? Squaw?
No question?
And from the entirely legal perspective, you see where I'm going with this, right?
Right, so,
Greg seemed to agree, except he seemed to remind me that I wasn't his client. I could read it in his eyes. But he was happy to see it.
Well, just remind Greg that his client agrees with you.
Well, then it would get more agreeable.
Everybody agrees.
But we understand the reasons why.
we understand the reasons why, but I think at the end of the day, once we get a consolidated plan, I think it'll be helpful to kind of communicate between both parties.
That just made it happen.
Mhm.
But just understand we gotta unwind it too.
That's right.
And some of this is a little complicated because it's gonna be unwound different. In other words, we know we had the conference center space taken out, but then all the rest of it was all one. So let's say we get into that 15,000 square feet on the side, maybe we develop that, maybe we enter into a lease with somebody for them to develop that. So there's lots of ways to break this apart with the new master plan, if you will, that says we can do the bottom floor, here's our exhibit space, here's 15,000, here's the tea room, whatever you wanna call it.
It's three.
Yeah.
Remember, it's URA,
It's
DDA,
URA.
MC.
Okay, so
DDA is
DDA
district.
is the district.
Exhibit space is URA.
Okay.
So we have, you know, of course, the good news is you guys are good legal on land, but just keep us straight. And we know this stuff is happening. So I'd like to know what I can do now while we're still in the theoretical stage, right? For them as well as us. We realize there's a risk on their part that they expect money in a building they may not ever get a lease on. But, you know, on the other hand,
DDA.
I don't want to lose these, because I think we could have them up and running by,
They will start with.
oh, easy. Big house, really nice. And then there's, let's just pick one. Okay, we know we have a sprinkler, the big white house, right? The big white house would go from basically just using the lower floors to using the upper floors, which that takes it into the 8,000 square foot range. And then he anticipates having more than 100 people, which means the current system that's in there would not meet that requirement.
That's right.
Now, we received his price, which basically said he believes he can update that to a full R13 for like 20 grand. That will irritate me tremendously if that is true.
The upper floor is,
It's a vacant space at this
I
point.
mean, is it built out?
No.
Okay, that would have to be,
Well, it would, but
Yeah.
basically the bottom line is, you know, we've heard for years that an upgraded system would cost just hundreds of thousands of dollars. And this guy has a real business card for a guy who does this for a living. And he's like, I'm talking steel, the whole 9 yards, full R13, and he says 20 grand. And I'm going, okay, you're on, you know, but you have to have a plan. And we're talking real people, so these are folks who are talking to the fire department. And, you know, something that was supposed to be complex is beginning to look not so complex. So let's see if it materializes.
And, you know, because, to the point of what you're saying, it's also a structural assessment because it wasn't built to hold that many people upstairs, so we have to make sure that it was built to hold that many people upstairs. So-
But that's the beauty of it for not being finished, is the way
It's
it kind
easier
of
to
sits
see.
right now, you can literally, remember the top floor, it's just plywood sitting on the top. So you've got access to everything. So this makes it pretty easy to make the changes, where we're not having to rip anything apart tremendously. But there are some common sense things that say, for those of you who remember where this house came from, you know, at the top floor and both of the big windows up there were exits. And it came out and basically took us up metal stairs and came down. Well, obviously, if you're gonna use it, you have to have an exit. Then that question now goes back to him and it says, if you really wanna do the New Orleans style, are we just talking about, you know, a 3-foot, you know, run down the ramp exit, which is
Something
reasonable?
architecturally significant.
Well, then that's where he's at, is to say, that's on him, right? I don't know if you're gonna set up fire escape stairs, but if we're gonna be talking about some, you know, New Orleans ability to sit over a back deck, that's your cost, not mine. So that's the beauty of the meeting in the minds, is to say, okay, and we know he has real resources, right? He sold an existing building here, he's not broke, so, and he's very happy to be here, so we'll just keep moving on that, because, you know, stay on.
Wait, I have a question. lease, let's say we do draw like some type of lease, like a generic lease, does URA and city have to have their separate leases, or it could be a generic one where we can change the name of it?
So if you're dealing with, private sector, then it'll have to go through one of your outside entities, it wouldn't be through the city.
Yeah, we already have it. In other words, she's already given us a lease. The DDA or URA attorney, who's also the DDA attorney, has a copy of that lease.
Okay.
So you can look at it.
Okay.
All I'm saying is the form is great. That's a legal decision. The blanks are a political decision.
Right, that's right.
That's the part I just want people to remember, is, we have to use what we have to have. So there's things you're gonna require, great, no problem with that. But we have to have the flexibility to keep these people, to get them there. And right now, let's face it, a year ago, the answer was not gonna happen. Now you have people saying, you will. Let's just use Vanquish as an example. This guy is pretty energetic, and we're like, you realize there's nobody out there. You realize you don't have visibility, and I can't tell you that that's gonna happen in the next 6 weeks, right? And he's like, I'll take it as it is, and that's my problem. I love that. That's usually easy to say until you actually open. And then you look at a Bible going, how many events you gonna hold for me this week?
A
And
transition like that, the first person to show up takes the most risk but gets the best
Right, the
reward.
best
that's
return,
correct.
yeah.
And that's exactly where we're at. So most of them, I want to try to get into, and you see this in some regular leases, a percent of sales. Charge you a small base. We realize you're gonna have bad days to start with, but if you hit a home run, I want to be along for part of that ride. As you said, when this thing goes, and then there are standards as to what percentages. Go on, can tell you this. Anybody who runs a restaurant can tell you the average is anywhere from 5 to 10%, depending on how great the district is. And that's yours. So you do better, I do better. So everybody does it. And that's what's gonna produce some cash flow. That's all. Anyway, Reynolds Road, because that one just came popping back up. We've got to use a plan, and we know that that's gonna be in the budgets that are gonna be put into the scene. But it's very important. Conference center, same thing. But what I feel here is, it's not like it's censored overload, it's really not. You think conference center, there's the opportunities over there. You think district, these are the opportunities, completely different people. And you're up here at the university, exact same thing. We can't chew gum and walk at the same time. Some of these projects are gonna take long, right? We're gonna get stuck on something, maybe the plan's not right, we don't understand that. I lose those people, maybe. But that doesn't keep us from moving forward. This one now picks up the Meadowbrook property. There's a local builder, as a matter of fact. Now, he's a small builder. And we get into now, if we were ready, and we know we've had some ideas, and it says, if we went in there with a cul-de-sac, then I've got to have all of that infrastructure. Road, sidewalk, everything. But the theory is, I've already got Meadowbrook, I've already got Lake Hartman. Why can't I use a rear access driveway? Prevented me from spending a tremendous amount of money on infrastructure. If the theory is I can't get there, fire department's got a fire plug right there on Meadowbrook. And because we got a certain amount of money in that property, if we do the full development, then we got to knock down the existing house. And you go, well, that existing house, even though it's not the best house in the world, if you haven't seen the housing market in Morrow lately, we got junk selling for $200 grand. So I've got a house. You might be able to put an argument that it could be worth 150, 200. Maybe we go in there and keep that and come up with a different plan. Otherwise, you got to now build that in. So, well, let's say the house is 150, we paid 350 for the property. Would we be better off, instead of having a Children's Way, which they're pretty close to each other, and it's going to be front level street, but the Meadowbrook houses, those lots are big. So would we be better off trading and getting 5 houses with 5 bigger lots that would kind of fit into what you see there? Or to get our money back, we got to trade for the infrastructure and the 10 homes, because he's going to need at least 10. And you go, okay, good question, but we got to.
Are they gonna be taller than a minor?
I got a feeling they're going to be taller.
Yeah, but I don't know that there's enough room out there for that retention pond you're gonna have.
Well, remember we own an L.
Yeah, I know,
In that
but
back section becomes.
you can't park the fire engine on the street though, right?
Why not? You own it. I can park a fire engine on our street. How do I know that? They had a fire in my neighborhood this last weekend, and they parked parked, one from Morrow, 2 ambulances, and probably every squad car plus 2 sheriff's parked. Tragedy, it was a tragedy. But if you park on the street, right? And park in front of your yard. And I tell you what, and we could ask the fire marshal, this would be fun. Even if they did have the back driveway, they'd block the street in.
But if, I guess.
It's true, they would just do it. Yes, you would. You would make them go down Harbin Woods, or you'd make them come into Carla Drive and come up. You'd block the street on the corner, you just make people go around. How do you know that? Because they do it all the time.
But I don't know that it's about blocking their street as much about the access they need to get to all of the 10 homes.
If you had 10, what if I only had 6? And they were all basically facing Lake Harbor and the other, but the access was from a common driveway on the back. Now suddenly everybody's got deep, big lots, and you can push the house a little bit further back, and it kind of blends in a little bit more with the houses that already exist. Otherwise, we get them pretty tight, and it's going to be noticeable.
Maybe that?
Yeah, that's a unique corner there.
It is, but it just simply says, keep the first house. Now suddenly you've got the ability to get big lots. Bulldoze everything, give me all brand new. I gotta have 10. It's gonna look different. And that's a matter of our code, right? So we can look at it and go, which do you prefer? The builder's gonna build something similar either way. But I think I prefer a bigger lot, try to capture the value of that house. And that's the only way you're gonna be able to afford to do it without taking a loss on the sale. But that's an example. And those are the things that we should be laying out that said, if we were ready, let's say you did the lot scenario, and don't hold me to this because I'm not 100% sure I'm right, but we know we could carve out of our property a single lot today and sell it to a developer, and he could build on a single lot, and he doesn't have to do any stormwater or anything. There it is. My understanding is you can do 2 or 3, and then after a certain number, it becomes something else. Well, I talked to a developer, and he said, it's just cheap. Carve out one, sell it. Carve out another one, sell it to somebody else. Well, he was sitting there going, don't sell it to the same guy. He was saying, don't sell it to the same guy. Sell one to Sylvia, one to the attorney, one to Gordon, and just do it over a period of time, and you accomplish the same objective. And you're going, okay, who would be the only entity that would get in the way? The city attorney, of course. But it's important to know that there's more than one way to do this. And again, we really have, today the market is super high, right?
I
Crazy
guess
high.
my thing is, living the subdivision that I live in, and, knowing that for a long period of time, nothing had been built, and then you had Central Park Loop. There just seems to be something very attractive when houses are available in Morrow, people are living in them. I think that's the thing that I kind of lean towards.
You know the one that's for sale in your subdivision is $299,000. Today, I'm not.
Ready to
making that
downsize?
up. In your subdivision, 2
Everybody's home, so.
It's $299. There's one in Clearbrook, $199.
So
These are
I
numbers
guess,
that are a little shocking.
a developer wouldn't be able to bring that product online immediately, but I think, kind of the benefit of Morrow and what people look for in Morrow, the opportunity to kind of roll out another version of the product today, I think it's a unique opportunity.
And we don't have very many big lots left, right? So when we were doing the 5 scraps to Central Parks, we had 20 acres, 30 acres, but we don't have that. It doesn't exist.
Because I guess back to the multifamily conversation, you drive through many areas in the Atlanta metro and, townhouses. Townhouses are hot. I mean, you go to some areas and you're like, wow, $400,000 for a townhouse?
300 for a lot.
So that kind of opportunity, reimagining some of the products, we're gonna want a quality product delivered, but reimagining what we have never offered before and the desirability of living in Morrow, maybe that's what we kind of encourage. Maybe we talk about that, maybe we look for something like that. Because a townhouse development will provide different accessibility than a single family unit.
Well, and some of what you're seeing, and that's pushing some of those price points that are necessary for us, we can call it a townhouse, but it's still a 3,000 square foot house that's sitting right beside a 3,000 square foot house. There's just zero lot lines. They're doing the exact same thing. When we think townhouse, we're still thinking, hey, we're laying down the street where it's the final side and everybody's got a car in
Oh,
front
no,
of
I'm
them.
not thinking
That's a
that.
disaster.
I'm thinking, you
It
know.
doesn't support your tax base, you know,
Yeah.
and it hurts the school system.
No, I'm
And I just came
thinking
from a meeting where they just talked
four
about
size brick,
Mount Zion
quality
Elementary,
product.
500 units. Two different projects, 500 units. And one of the persons on that authority is also on the school board. And he just said, you just filled up a brand new high school. And they're like, sucks to you.
Where are these developing?
Mount Zion Elementary. 500 units.
Off of Mount Zion Road.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mount Zion Road or Parkway?
With the theory, this was the part that was enjoyable and the shock to the school board. The theory was this was supposed to improve the school system. That was part of the selling point. He's like, sell me that again. 500 units, you just packed out my schools. I'm now overcrowded, people live in
Apartments?
trailers.
Apartments you're talking about?
Yes. With a theoretical price point of $1,400 a month.
Across the board or just the three bedrooms?
I was getting into the weeds, but it was, let's just say, I'm not sure it was a selling point. I think that the school board guy was not happy. And I'm not sure it meets a lot of criteria. It's not in the city, but it's one of those where it has tremendous impacts. And you're just like, I'm not sure that meets those ideals.
Yeah.
I have a question. You know the area over by the eye clinic over there, that in back of there, all of that property is, you know, if those places are being, because at one time they
We're
were
not
like,
wrong.
Well, we had
no,
a
it was,
discussion.
you know, what was back there?
Strayer University.
Strayer and all of that.
Are they still there?
Are those businesses still?
Strayer's gone.
Yeah, but the back building is empty, you remember?
That medical office.
Yeah, the back building.
Okay, and
That-
then
that
I
was
think
a
what
little bit
UPS or
Interesting.
what else is over there? FedEx or UPS used to be over there?
Well,
Because, I mean, that's, to me, that
Used to
whole
be a
little
metal
area
box,
is like a,
Strayer, Clayton.
you know, that could be,
It's got wonderful potential.
yeah,
The
To be
gentleman who
redeveloped.
owns the medical facility is intelligent. But I think he just got a readjustment. He got the building for a really good price. And he'd like it to stay that way. And he's a doctor, so he has the ability to put doctor-related people there. I think he wants to have a conversation with us to see if we can figure out how to have a government use for it to keep his taxes down to something nominal. In reality, you know, he got it for a song. It's now being adjusted back to something more reasonable, and his tax number went to like 40 grand. He's now having to fit.
Y'all probably remember meeting him, Dr. Raj. He came to a Christmas party at the Morrow Center a couple of years back. Anyway, and back then, when we met him for the first time, and he was like, if this happens and I can't bring my state-of-the-art orthopedic, blah, blah, blah. But all these years later, clearly, I don't think he intends to bring his state-of-the-art
Yeah.
orthopedic. I think he wants to maintain it at a certain
yeah.
value, so.
So on that one, pay the fine, pay the tax.
Let it go over.
Because then you gotta put somebody in it, and you know doctors, good grief, we don't know doctors, you know doctors. So you kind of reached the conclusion that it was a great price on a building, and it's like an emergency room. The two medical facility surgery, the people who built it for paying customers, outpatient, mostly cosmetic, you know, where, you know, fairly well-off people could go get the adjustments they want. Then they built the ones down there at Eagles Landing, and,
Do we offer as a city, so we've had conversations before about attracting industries. You know, I had mentioned before, you know, is it an opportunity for us to, you know, attract technology or some facet? We've got a miniature-sized healthcare industry in the city. I mean, do we talk about offering some sort of incentive to build that up? The opportunity for that?
I'll give you a lifetime example. So I met with Harley Davidson today trying to talk about some marketing. And he says, I think this was a couple different people there, so don't hold me on this, but they have a really cool prototype in Columbia that of storefront grant or
We
renovation.
talked about that, facade grant.
And you look at it and you go, you realize that we only get a small portion of what's available. First, I want to see what he's talking about, but I think based on the conversations, it sounded pretty good. But in this case, the only people who would be giving up tax revenue would be the city itself. And you go, well, depends on how much that is, because I can't imagine he's probably paying more to the city, what, maybe $5,000, $6,000. You know, when you're gonna make a huge renovation, $5,000, $6,000 ain't gonna get you very far, especially if you're renovating, you know, a mobile car dealership. But he's talking about moving his storefront from the front to the back, so that he's got that great visibility there. And you go, that's interesting. And then, you know, maybe some partnerships to help each other. I think the door's open. You know, we didn't say, no, we just said it's not a program we have, but it doesn't mean it's not a program we want.
So, let's have, let's have pointed conversations about some incentives to attract business, to, you know, to give more tools and resources. Because, you know, from what I, off the top of my head, can think of, you know, Clayton Eye Center is there. You know, we just discussed the gentleman has the building that's kind of already fitted for medical facility of some sort. Then you've got over by the mall, that cluster of dentist offices and different types of offices. I mean, it's an
I think you'd
opportunity
be
for us.
surprised at just how much money in total they pay, but how much the city's tax is in comparison. 20 mils to the school board, so many to the county, and then Morrow's is this much. You can play with that much on your own.
So
Some
if it's
rules.
not something that we can deliver directly, is there a way to, through the development authority, county arms, which have more funding, can we discuss the topic of industry-related incentives?
I think the answer is yes. Well, I'm pretty sure the answer is yes. So we got a good relationship with Eric, we know that. I think we just have to know what we're selling. Here would be my thought. So if I'm listening to this guy, and he's basically talking about renovating a building that, I mean, it was renovated one time when it came out of Terry Cullen's place, right? But that hadn't been renovated since the early 90s. If you're talking about spending a reasonable amount of money, then, especially if you
We have qualifications.
yeah, if you own title to it, then there ought to be a way and authority, but maybe not, but it could be ours too, but where we are trying to figure out how to take possession of it to take the tax number off.
Yeah, well, we can do that, we don't have to do it through the county, we can do it our own development.
Yeah, and
But
so,
that
you
way
know,
we
you
save
have-
them the tax, and on a temporary basis, which I think is 10 years, right? Is
I
that-
think it is, it's a limitation on there, and basically what it is it's under the redevelopment act that it incentivizes those to come in and revitalize business and industry in a particular area. And then there is a graduated schedule where there's a diminutive amount of tax revenue that you can charge, and then it kind of graduates back up as set forth in the statute.
Because we would be layering our retail corridor with our healthcare industry right there next to each other.
So
If
his,
there's
I think,
any one of those buildings that probably could be converted or something for living space over in that area.
yeah, I think if you had to just take visual, of course, Harley Davidson, what you like about him is that's real, right? You know, he already has another building, he says he's done just like it. He even talked about how he would stage it to make it happen, and that's a national brand. And, you know, at some point, the other answer is I do nothing, or I move my location to someplace else that's not here.
So Jonesboro did facade grants.
Well, this would be bigger than a facade grant. A facade grant would be giving
Well,
a few $1,000s to a small
When you're,
business.
see, in my mind, when you're referencing the Harley Davidson, that's something different than from what I guess I'm kind of mentioning with regard to an industry-related incentive. So that's why I was saying that to the facade grant.
Facade, say it's facade grants, you mean only businesses in a certain industry would have? would
No,
be
no, no,
able
no.
to-
I would feel more comfortable if you own the business
Mhm.
and I let you do that. I'm not sure, I wouldn't discount it, but let's just take it a different way. All right, you own a 1976 building, you've been renting it for a long time, you've made no reinvestment in it whatsoever, and now I'm gonna give you a break for basically not maintaining your property.
No.
I mean, that kind of bothers me.
No.
You know, John owns
Some
his
leveling
location,
up
and we're
of
trying to
value and
add
appeal
something.
and,
That I
yeah,
could go.
yeah, so, and the reason why I'm clarifying, because, you know, I like clarity. the conversation to me was kind of combining everything. I was saying something a little different. You've got the retail corridor. If there's an opportunity to provide industry-related incentives, we've got a miniature-sized healthcare, health and wellness, you know, in the area. And then when he mentioned Harley Davidson, that to me was something different. So that's why I'm kind of.
Well, our medical, we have a competition for the local hospital, and then our retail redevelopment area around the hospital related to that, plus Phoenix Boulevard, which is huge.
Okay.
But it's like, how does our little spot thing compete with theirs? The way that I think you make that work is almost like an individual, but it's still an LLC, but you're the doctor, and you have to be willing to build this compound and make an investment.
Offering something is better than.
No, okay, I totally agree. But I think Harley Davidson is live talent, and I don't think he was kidding. So he's like, show me the pictures and see how we can make it happen.
Is he interested in the Thunder Tower thing again?
Well, and when I first became city manager, which would have been back in 2014, we had this exact same conversation, where he had been told by the previous planning department that he could not face the interstate. And we went over the code with him, and was like, that's not the case, that's not the case.
He's our
so-
strongest brand.
Yeah,
With-
so
I mean,
you
Macy's
can,
is-
you wanna flip your building, turn it upside down, go for it, you know, we're not gonna get in your way, but, you know, that was 6 years ago, and so,
But that kind of reinvestment,
I-
we know once you make that investment, your taxes are going to go up.
Let's do it.
right?
I'm all
So
for
it's-
it. I mean,
it's-
it makes
it's
sense
twofold.
for-
One is, there's a tax break you get now, which goes back into the pie. Then there's the future value that you probably just double the value of your building because of the impact. You want to kind of get some of your money back before you make that big of a challenge.
I'd
And he
love,
also says there.
if he's ready to start doing that, I would hope we're all very excited about that. And to your point, we wanna create something that partners with him, if a partnership is what he needs to get it done, then we need to be that partner in any way we can.
But today was more marketing, you know, because he's got a strong brand, he's got some things we're trying to do.
Is he gonna give you
That's why I asked why
gonna
you
give you
see
that
it.
video?
Sorry.
Is he gonna give you the video that's on his side? That's what you were supposed to ask him. I knew I shouldn't have left you alone.
Right, the question that we're asking.
The important one that I showed up for. So, I'll circle back.
We'll circle back.
We know it's past 9:30. Any other comments? And be prepared, Public Works and Economic Development at the next city council meeting to be answering questions related to your projects. We've had them on a list for a while, but now we want to know where are they, you know, and be able to stand flat-footed and explain them. So, other questions, any? Meeting adjourned.